capitalism is dead. It's the end of capitalism, and like capitalism has fallen prey to a new mode of production, being techno-feudalism. So we have entered into a state of feudalism, based on the advancements that like the capitalist society has given us. So on the back of surveillance capitalism, so a form of capitalism builds upon the tech industry and their ability to surveil the world's populations in, like, most importantly, I would say the consumer class, and like getting data on the consumer class helps run the economy now. And like it's feudal because these people rule their digital fiefdoms, their digital principalities, their digital kingdoms with absolute impunity, and like with absolute power, like, and control, over the people that are within those digital domains. And so like they don't seek profit anymore in the traditional sense. Like they make profit, don't get me wrong, their industries and their endeavors are very profitable, but like they don't seek profit like a capitalist does, who like invests money, capital at one end of the process, and like puts into motion labor and means of production in order to realize more money at the end, i.e. profit. They're not interested in this type of enterprise anymore. They're into basically monopolizing the entire industry and controlling the entirety of digital infrastructure to control the world economy. And like kind of, profit is kind of a byproduct of that. It's not the direct purpose. The direct purpose is total information awareness, because with the power of information control in the information age, these are the people that now basically sit at the top of the social hierarchy. They are our ruling class. They are the techno-feudal overlords that run society. And so like we have been progressively investigating this concept, and like I think the theoretical kind of basis for techno-feudalism is the idea of surveillance capitalism, which was coined by Shoshana Zuboff, depending on how you pronounce her name, who is another intellectual of the American tradition this time. And like she basically has gone through rather meticulously in 2019 and published a very investigative work on this idea of surveillance capitalism being like the newest and highest stage of capitalism currently, which is built around kind of this tech world, these tech giants, Silicon Valley, and like their counterparts in China, who kind of basically control the information and the data collection of like the world's populations. And like through that information control, that data collection, they're able to kind of not only create a new product that wasn't really there before through their massive supercomputers and their artificial intelligence. They can process all of this immense data that is given to them by the second in real time, and they can produce not only a product for other like kind of capitalists who want to buy information about people so they can sell them products and push products onto them, but like they also use this stuff to modify people's behavior so they can control how the consumer class actually even operates, which is like an incredibly sophisticated way of using like technology and like controlling like the capitalistic economy now. It's got nothing to do with like which section of the bourgeoisie is it, like the capitalist, industrial capitalist class, or the old school industrial capitalists who control manufacturing and all that sort of stuff, or is it the people that control resources like your oil tycoons or your mining magnates, or is it like financial capitalists who control the world's financial systems through like big banks and Wall Street, and like her hypothesis is no, it's not those people anymore. It is the tech giants, because they control the information that feeds into the entirety of the globalized economy. The globalized economy is held together by digital infrastructure, by the Internet of Things and telecommunications technology. And like, you know, they say that, you know, every business now is also a software business, because like, you know, everybody has to have a digital presence. Like, it's very, very rare that you would come across a business that only exists in the real world and doesn't have some presence online. And so if every business now is both digital and in the physical realm, if not, you know, you just have some businesses that are completely in the digital realm. If all businesses are subject to being digitized, and that digital landscape is kind of controlled by, you know, a small number of players that can control this digital architecture that holds the world's economy together, then these surveillance capitalists are the highest part of the bourgeoisie, and they really do control the world economy. And so this is the age of surveillance capitalism, as Shoshana would say. And so like, we have been progressively going through and exploring this world of techno-feudalism potentially, and definitely surveillance capitalism. We've been looking at the history of it, and we've been, you know, investigating like different parts. Like, we've looked at like kind of the birth of the internet itself. Like, how did the internet come about? Like, what was going on there, which kind of influenced how we have ended up with surveillance capitalism and possibly even techno-feudalism. And like, you know, like the internet was always sold to my generation anyway as like kind of this liberatory tool that was going to, you know, democratize information and spread it amongst the world, and everyone was going to be able to have a piece of that and then exist in a new world, a brave new world that was just kind of, you know, not possible before the dot-com boom and the rise of information technologies. And like, you know, like the internet was always like I said, sold as this thing that would be a great benefit to humanity, because it would connect everyone, produce social conditions that we've never even dreamed of, and like given us the power that comes with information control that like no broad mass of the population has ever been able to get their hands on. So like the implications were huge, and this is the story we were sold about the internet. But like, that is completely a myth. It's complete urban legend, like crafted as a very, very particular psyop operation from the 80s and the 90s onwards, because prior to the 80s and the 90s, like everyone who had worked on the internet and like, you know, its forerunners, APRANET, you know, for the US military and stuff like that, they were fully cognizant of the dark side of the internet, like how the internet was basically produced as, yes, it was a communications technology for the army, and like, you know, a lot of people that are slightly in the know, you know, you know that side of it. Oh, you know, it used to be a military technology, but like, you know, private sector got their hands on it and like, you know, made it available to the broad masses. And aren't we lucky to have the private industry to, you know, birth the internet age? But like, the real story is, yes, it was created by the US military in the 60s during the Vietnam War as a communications software that they could use to basically disseminate large-scale information on their enemies in Vietnam, who were an amorphous target, because like they weren't a traditional military. They could have been anyone in the population, and so they needed to surveil them with great ubiquity and great comprehensiveness. And like, in order to be able to crunch all of that raw data, they needed a system that they could easily communicate on and could process all of that data on such an amorphous target. But the reason they needed to have this communication technology was because they were surveilling people. And so APRANET and the internet is fundamentally not a communications software, but a surveillance software. It was developed to surveil people and produce and like to spread that information around. And like, it is communicative. It is a communication technology by nature of the fact that its raison d'être is to surveil. It's primarily surveillance technology that is used to communicate that surveillance information, and nothing has changed. Like, I remember reading The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana and thinking like, oh, you know, this started kind of this idea of surveillance kind of, you know, it was there, but like, you know, it started at the start of the millennia with the rise of like Google and stuff like that. But like the internet itself was already a surveillance technology, and like it was the government. And Shoshana talks about this greatly in The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, or she talks about it in her other work anyway. Is like, you know, after what happened in 9/11, like you have to like, it really lends itself to this idea of historical materialism. Like, you know, after 9/11, like the intelligence services, the security agencies in America, they wanted to be able to surveil the world's populations. And like, you know, they were criticized heavily as like 9/11 happened because it was a failure of the security apparatus in America to be able to connect the dots and like, you know, stop this terrorist attack from happening. And so like, you know, in the wake of that shame, you know, the American intelligence services, like, you know, they were like, well, we got this software, we've got this communications device, it's growing, you know, it's connecting the world. Like, we want basically what they described as total information awareness. They wanted to be able to, you know, get information on the entire world's population so they could kind of, you know, connect the dots and like, you know, stop this stuff from happening. But like, you know, because of constitutions and legislation and like sovereignty and you know, rules basically about like the limitations of government, especially in somewhere like America where they're very fearful of like, you know, the old tyrannical government coming and taking away their rights and encroaching on their liberties. Like the you know, the CIA, let's say, they couldn't do this overtly. Like, they do it covertly, don't get me wrong, but they couldn't do this total information kind of thing overtly, and they needed a vehicle to do that. And so like in steps the private industry, and like they married up with the private industry very, very well to develop the internet with, under this mythology, this urban legend of it being like, you know, this new communications tool that is going to, you know, change the economy and change social relations and social life across the planet. And it's going to be like this amazing, you know, liberatory force. It's going to liberate the world's populations and break down barriers and all this sort of stuff. But like, you know, yeah, it was going to do all of, like, it was going to break down some barriers. It was going to break down the barrier of the privacy of the individual, the right to privacy of the individual. And like, you know, so Shoshana will famously ask the question is like, you know, when, you know, the Googles of the world, when the Facebooks of the world decided that they wanted this information and they were going to use this information and like, you know, weaponize it, monetize it, however you want to call it, capitalize on it, let's say, they made a claim to all of this data, this private data of the individuals on the internet basically, and on the Internet of Things, and like they claimed rights over this data, and like no one asked, you know, was this acceptable? Like, should they actually have the right to have all of this data? Like, who decides, you know, and like, should they be able to lay claim to all of it? And like, you know, if you ask this question like 20 years ago, like most people would probably be like, well, no, like, you know, I should have rights to my data. But if you ask it now, after, you know, years of using this technology and like, dare I say, indoctrination, you know, most people would say, well, you know, it's the price you pay for convenience, like kind of thing. And so like people are just like, yeah, well, you know, if they surveil me, then like, you know, that's what it costs to have Gmail or, you know, to be on social media. And like, you know what, I don't have anything to hide anyway, so like if you don't have anything to hide, what are you worried about, like kind of thing. And so yeah, the world's populations kind of have become acquainted with and used to being surveilled in a kind of, like I said, a marriage of convenience between the private sector and the state, the deep state, basically, in America and other countries too. But like, this leads us now to a point where it's just like, well, really, who's behind these decisions? And so like the last couple of days, we've spent a bit of time looking at this gentleman called Curtis Yarvin, who is kind of it seems really random, but he's connected to all of this because he is the philosophical backdrop, as I would say, but I've heard other people say he's the prophet of the tech bros. So like the tech bros, the people in Silicon Valley who have developed all of this technology in concert with, you know, the deep state and like the American government, let's say, to surveil the world's populations, they have risen to such levels of prominence because of the wealth that it is endowed upon them, that they have incredible levels of control over the political scene. And like, if you have incredible levels of wealth in an exchange society, in a capitalist society, you do get political power that comes with that, or the ability to mobilize political power because you can purchase your way into government. And like, these people have their own ideologies as well. Like, many of these Silicon Valley types are libertarians. And like, you know, they're, let's say, broadly right wing and conservative. And yes, some of them are libertarians and some of them more extreme than even being libertarian, which is like, you know, pretty radical ideology in the sense that, like, you know, most of the world's population live in a sovereign state, which is heavily supported by government structure. And one of the main principles of libertarianism is basically to destroy the government, like, you know, wither the government away to an absolute nothingness, if not a bare necessity, if possible. And most nations around the world rely heavily on the governments just to function and serve their populations. So, like, you know, the libertarian worldview is I would say rather radical. And like the Silicon Valley types, the tech bros, our techno-feudalists, the cloud capitalists, the tech oligopoly, like whatever you want to call these people as a collective, they have their own ideological framework. And so like Curtis Yarvin was kind of behind a lot of the thoughts that are rising out of Silicon Valley in the wake of their amassing of great fortunes and power. And like, he provides a lot of kind of convincing arguments on their outlook. And so like, we kind of divulged into this kind of exploration of like how this libertarian plus you know, right-wing fanaticism like will develop itself in a Silicon Valley context. And you have people like, you know, Balaji Srinivasan, I can't say his name properly, Srinivasan, who has, you know, produced, like, you know, in concert with others, but like, you know, has produced kind of this idea of the network state. And so the network state is like, you know, the expression of these Silicon Valley tech lords and their extreme wealth. And so like, they are funding projects which basically can exit society. They are creating new cities that weren't there before. They're funding the construction of new network states, which are opposed to nation states. These are autonomous sovereign states that are run as libertarian city-states. So like, you know, it's created by a rich founding member, and you can purchase citizenship there, and you live in kind of like a tax haven that has its own rules, laws, and legislation, but it gains its sovereignty by negotiation with an existing nation state. But a sovereign network state is like connected initially via a network and conglomerates on the network, so on the internet, and they start to crowdfund stuff and then bring that network into a real state, like a real, in the physical world, a real place where people live and conglomerate under the same ideological framework, usually being a libertarian perception of the world, that like everything should be run privately, and there should be zero government intervention in anything, because the market will regulate all things. Government is really a hindrance to the exchange nature of the human individual. And so like, you know, you have Curtis Yarvin, you have like thinkers like Balaji Srinivasan, who are like, you know, deeply ingrained in the Silicon Valley culture, and they're coming up with ideas like, you know, exiting society or creating new societies from within. This is real stuff. Like, they have created these cities, or they're creating these cities right now. They're funding these ideas. Like, if you've ever wondered why Trump's administration is interested in Greenland, like, kind of thing, and you're thinking, oh, it must have some strategic value from a militaristic sense. Maybe it's got some rare earth minerals, because everybody loves rare earth minerals at the moment, kind of thing. Ask the people in Ukraine. Maybe it's got something to do with that. Well, these people, these tech bros, have kind of have plans to build one of these network state cities in Greenland. So that might shed some light on it for you, and it will shed some light on how important the tech oligopoly, the techno-feudalists, are in politics today. Okay, so Trump's administration is not only stacked like an absolute, oligopoly in the true sense of ruled by a few, like a select few of a very particular class, like ruled by billionaires. Basically, his administration is all just a list of his billionaire friends and associates, but a significant portion of them, or if not the administration itself, advisors to them, are people from Silicon Valley. They are tech bros. And Trump's inauguration said enough that he had front row at his inauguration the biggest tech bros of Silicon Valley. So the current CEO of Google, Elon Musk, obviously, Mark Zuckerberg, and Jeff Bezos. This was a nod to the fact that the tech bros, they're not just an important sector in the economy, they are fundamental to the way that politics is not only operating, but is fashioned. It reproduces itself now in the capitalist system we have under a surveillance capitalist purview.
Remember, I am, you are, we are a mystery.
I am on Patreon. Please follow the link in the description and sign up for free. We are trying to build a revolutionary community over there. So go become a member for free and join the conversation. If you can contribute financially, that would help a lot.